On May 3, 2025, the United States and Ukraine signed a landmark agreement known as the United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund. This deal marks a new chapter in the complex relationship between the two countries, linked to the ongoing war in Ukraine and its global ramifications. The agreement grants the U.S. access to critical minerals and natural resources within Ukrainian territory, including rare earth minerals, oil, natural gas, gold, and copper. In exchange, the United States pledges continued support for Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression. This support will manifest through military aid and investments aimed at rebuilding Ukraine's infrastructure and economy. The deal has been met with mixed reactions, raising questions about its potential impact on U.S.-Ukraine relations and the broader geopolitical landscape. For Ukraine, the deal represents a lifeline, a source of much-needed financial and military support. For the United States, it is an opportunity to secure access to critical resources and strengthen its position against Russia. However, the deal is not without its critics, who argue it smacks of opportunism and worry about the long-term implications for Ukraine's sovereignty. As the ink dries on the agreement, the world watches closely to see how this new chapter in U.S.-Ukraine relations will unfold. The United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund is structured around a simple yet significant principle: compensation. The deal frames access to Ukraine's resources as repayment for the extensive military and financial assistance provided by the United States since the Russian invasion began in 2022. The deal stipulates that Ukraine will contribute 50% of all future revenue generated from new licenses for critical minerals, oil and gas exploration to the jointly managed reinvestment fund. This revenue-sharing model ensures that both countries benefit from the exploitation of Ukraine's natural resources. Importantly, the agreement does not require Kyiv to reimburse the U.S. for past aid, a significant concession during negotiations. While the deal grants the U.S. access to Ukrainian resources, Ukraine retains ownership of its subsoil, maintaining control over the exploitation of its natural resources. Furthermore, the agreement does not grant the U.S. exclusive rights, allowing Ukraine to strike deals with other countries in the future. All U.S. earnings derived from the agreement will be tax-free and exempt from Ukrainian levies, maximizing profits for American companies and investors. It is impossible to divorce the United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund from the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine. The conflict, now in its third year, has claimed countless lives, displaced millions, and left Ukraine's economy in ruins. The war has created an atmosphere of urgency and desperation, a backdrop against which the U.S.-Ukraine deal has been negotiated. Ukraine, in dire need of continued military and financial assistance, has been forced to make concessions to secure its survival. The United States, seeking to counter Russian aggression and secure access to critical resources, has seized the opportunity to advance its interests in the region. The timing of the deal is significant, coming at a time when peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have stalled. This interpretation is bolstered by recent statements from senior U.S. officials, including President Trump, who has expressed frustration with both sides and hinted at a potential shift in U.S. strategy. The United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund is the culmination of weeks of tense negotiations between U.S. and Ukrainian officials. This is not the first time the Trump administration has attempted to secure access to Ukraine's natural resources. Just 2 months prior, an earlier attempt at a deal collapsed during an Oval Office meeting between President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The initial U.S. draft reportedly included demands for a staggering $500 billion share of Ukraine's mineral wealth, a non-starter for the Ukrainian delegation. The failed negotiations highlighted the stark power imbalance between the two countries and fueled accusations that the Trump administration was exploiting Ukraine's vulnerability. In the subsequent round of negotiations, Ukraine adopted a more assertive stance, successfully pushing back against unreasonable U.S. demands and securing more favorable terms. The United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund has elicited a range of reactions from key players in both the United States and Ukraine. In Washington, the deal has been met with cautious optimism by the Biden administration, which views it as a necessary step to secure U.S. interests in the region and bolster Ukraine's defenses against Russian aggression. Secretary of State Antony Blinken praised the agreement, stating that it demonstrates the enduring commitment of the United States to a free, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine. However, not everyone in Washington is convinced of the deal's merits. Some lawmakers, particularly within the Republican Party, have expressed concerns about the financial burden it places on American taxpayers. Others have questioned whether the access to Ukraine's resources is worth the potential escalation of tensions with Russia. In Ukraine, the reaction to the deal has been more mixed. President Zelensky, while acknowledging the difficult concessions made by his country, has defended the agreement as essential for securing Ukraine's future. However, the deal has also faced criticism from some quarters in Ukraine, with opposition lawmakers accusing Zelensky of selling out Ukraine's sovereignty. Public opinion on the deal remains divided, reflecting the complex realities of a country at war and the difficult choices its leaders are forced to make. The United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund is a significant development in the geopolitical struggle between the United States and Russia. The deal reshapes the balance of power, with far-reaching implications for global security and stability. For the U.S., it secures access to critical minerals, maintaining its technological edge over rivals. It also strengthens its position in Eastern Europe, countering Russian dominance. For Russia, the deal undermines its control over Ukraine and its resources. The U.S.-Ukraine partnership strengthens, complicating Russia's objectives. China views the deal with suspicion, as it seeks to expand its influence. European nations, dependent on Russian energy, watch the situation closely. The deal is a global flashpoint, with potential to reshape the international order. The world is watching the deal's impact on global geopolitics. As expected, the Russian government has reacted to the United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund with a mixture of condemnation and thinly veiled threats. The Kremlin wasted no time in denouncing the agreement as a blatant attempt by the United States to exploit the ongoing conflict in Ukraine for its own economic and geopolitical gain. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accused the United States of neo-colonialism and warned that the deal would have serious consequences for U.S.-Russia relations. Lavrov characterized the agreement as further evidence of the West's hypocrisy in claiming to support Ukraine's sovereignty while simultaneously seeking to profit from its vulnerability. Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Security Council, denounced the deal as theft and vowed that Russia would respond accordingly. Analysts believe that Moscow is likely to retaliate through a combination of economic, diplomatic, and potentially even military means. The deal has undoubtedly heightened tensions between the United States and Russia, further complicating an already fraught relationship. While the Biden administration has presented a united front in support of the United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund, the deal has exposed underlying divisions within the U.S. government about the country's long-term strategy in Ukraine and its approach to Russia. The deal has been met with skepticism from some quarters of the Republican Party, particularly those aligned with former President Donald Trump, who has long advocated for a more isolationist foreign policy. These voices argue that the deal unnecessarily entangles the United States in Ukraine's problems and risks further antagonizing Russia. On the other side of the aisle, some Democrats have expressed concerns about the lack of concrete security guarantees for Ukraine in the agreement. They argue that while the deal provides economic benefits and demonstrates U.S. commitment, it does little to deter potential future Russian aggression. The Biden administration must now navigate a complex web of diplomatic, economic, and military considerations as it charts a course forward in Ukraine. The decisions made in the coming months and years will have profound implications for U.S. interests, global security, and the future of Europe. The United States-Ukraine Reinvestment Fund marks a new chapter in the complex relationship between the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. The deal has the potential to reshape the geopolitical landscape, but its ultimate impact remains uncertain. One potential outcome is that the deal could provide Ukraine with the economic and military support it needs to withstand Russian aggression, and eventually negotiate a peaceful resolution to the conflict. However, the deal also carries significant risks, potentially provoking a backlash from Russia and deepening Ukraine's dependence on the United States. The success or failure of the deal will depend on factors including the resolve of the Ukrainian people, the willingness of the United States and its allies to provide sustained support, and the calculations of the Russian government. The road ahead is fraught with uncertainty, but the stakes are high, not just for Ukraine, but for the future of Europe and the international order. The coming months and years will be crucial in determining whether the agreement will contribute to peace and stability, or exacerbate existing tensions and fuel further conflict.